Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Boy, am I excited for our episode today. Before I introduce you to our guest, here's a quote just for this podcast. I understand that there's going to come a time where I'm not going to be there for these kids. And I want them to understand the values, the importance of being who you are, the importance of being a leader, not a follower, because I send those kids off to school every day and they're out in the world. Jim Sabellico. Our guest today, been on the show before, episode 482, season 41. My friend said that freaking awesome quote. I was re-listening to that first episode earlier today. We covered so much from client values, the client being, so important. We covered leadership, a little bit about our guest story, but he's come back for whatever reason to unpack some more about leadership, and I'm sure so many amazing things. By the way, I just noticed you have Groot in the background. That makes me really
I
excited. I
do.
love that guy.
Yeah.
Jim,
It's a
thanks for
favorite
coming
of my
back.
daughter. You're welcome, brother. I'm really honored to be here. I very much enjoyed our first conversation. I enjoy our friendship and any opportunity to do more of either one of those, I'm all in.
What stuck out to me so much about that quote is like, well, there's a couple really deep things, but the value of values. I want to explore that idea with you for a second here. The
Sure.
value of values. What do you mean by that? Or where do you think because I think he'd be overlooked, like what values really are.
I believe the biggest value of values is it gives you a really clear yes and no, black and white answer for how to operate. Like to me, I think when you are super clear on your values, it allows you so much freedom because you don't really have to think about, hey, should I do this thing? Yes or no. It's really simple. Does it align with my values? Yes or no. And if it does, do it. If it doesn't, don't. I believe that is what the
Hmm.
value of values is.
Yeah, I love that. Why is it so? Or what about this though? Have you seen people? Because okay, I really have. Right, write them down. I write down the values, and then I forget about the values. We're like, how do we remind ourselves of our values or live out our values as opposed to just getting caught up with the writing down or the putting, on the wall. Like yeah, that would be if you even have advice on what's worked for you of how to stay integrated.
So I would say it's the daily practice of living them out until they become synonymous with who you are. So when I say that, what I mean is if you start by saying, one of the things I value is personal relationships, and that's important to you. But there is some disconnect between you saying that and you living it out. You start to remind yourself of that daily. And then as you continue to remind yourself of that over the course of 6 months, it starts to materialize in your life. You're basically closing the gap between the things that you say are your values and what you actually act out on a day to day basis. Right. So, what I believe there
Closing the
is
gap.
you start to define your values and then your values start to define you. So you start out by saying, hey, this is who I am. And it could be an ideal state, right? It could be a thing where you say, hey, this is who I envision myself to be. I am a man who values X, Y, and Z. And for the first, you know, portion of that, it's going to be a rough go of it because you're not necessarily operating within that yet. And there is a lot more work required to get up to speed. But as you build discipline, as you start to live those things out day to day, it becomes ingrained in your character and who you are, and you don't have to really try to honor that, to live that out. It just becomes more aligned with who you are on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, it's closing the gap.
I think that's completely been my experience with Culture Matters. Like there's things I'm doing today that I maybe are as a consequence of say, okay, culture matters. Like there's things that I'm in 2024. I said, I'm going to start introducing people that are important to me. It's like that. I think that's a cultural act, like, or relational, right? Like, hey,
Right.
Jim, you have to meet. I could think of like a couple people, you know, Tyler, because of this reason. Tyler, you have to meet Jim because of this reason. I know you both. It's like, well, why wasn't I doing that years ago?
Yeah, I would say it wasn't something you put priority on. So it's a thing that's where we talk about the value of values. If you're not prioritizing that value, it just becomes a thing in your life, a saying on the wall, a quote written in your notebook, but it does not become something that you use to actually operate by. It's not an operating principle. Like, when you start to say that, what I envision is routines for my kids. They don't by nature want to brush their teeth every night when they go to bed, but we start instilling a habit that's like, hey, the first thing you
I'm
do,
laughing because I still don't want to brush my teeth.
you know, and why? Like it's not
It's
this painful
yeah,
process, but for some reason we
yeah.
put it off. But when it
Yeah.
becomes part of an everyday routine and becomes who you are, you start to not even think twice about it. Right. So we started to say, hey, this is what our nightly routine looks like. We're going to do X, Y, and Z, and Y in that situation is brush your teeth. So it doesn't become a daily argument. It just becomes, all right, part of my daily routine in going to sleep is I do this, this, and this. And we start to build that into who we are and how we operate and become subconscious. Right. And so I believe that reaching out to connect your two friends becomes a subconscious activity after a long time of making it a conscious activity. We have to intentionally program ourselves to install those
Oh,
things
that's
out.
good. And there's some certain things that I'm gonna do that I don't want to do anymore. That the value of who I am as a person is challenged in that interaction. Like there's things that I have to say yes to and things I have to say no to.
Right,
The maybe and the exploration of like, all right, if I want to introduce my friends, well, that's another thing on my plate. What do I have to take off of my plate? I can't introduce my friends if I'm well, obviously I can't if I don't even have any.
right.
I better get some friends. I better have some podcasts to be able to not just people that own podcasts obviously introduce, but um yeah, this that I love that the value of values is the living out of the values. That stuck out from the last conversation. What if you had a word? Did you have a word for 2024?
Yeah.
Yeah, what was
Uh,
that again?
the word for 2024 was space.
Oh, what was the inspiration?
I am, I don't want to use the word busy, right? Because busy isn't always productive, but I am committed to a lot of different things and I enjoy a lot of different things. Um, as you can see over my shoulder, I'm currently 3D printing some Christmas ornaments. Um,
Wow.
I'm like this morning I spent 3 hours baking cookies for my kids' school tomorrow. Uh, I had a podcast before this, 3 meetings, went for a walk. Like there's a lot of things that I want to do in the course of a day, and I don't want to do less of that. So in order to do that, it requires space. And to me, what I wanted to do was to prioritize my time to create space within my day to day to be able to do the things that I enjoy, while also having room for whatever comes up that maybe isn't planned. One of the things that's obviously most important to me is that no half cakes principle, where I don't want to miss out on an opportunity to be present in my day to day. And if I'm so rigid in the things that go on, where I can't create space when I need to, I'm going to miss out. So it's about having the systems and processes to be really diligent about doing the things that I have to do, I manage 5 different businesses. Uh, that not an easy thing to do time wise while also doing everything else. So to me, that's what space was about being diligent with the time that I have, while really providing the opportunity to be present.
What did you learn from your podcast this year?
Oof. I would say the majority of what I learned from podcasts this year would be listening to people's stories without an expectation of what they're going to provide. Because I think you've done enough podcasts and then some to know that like when you interview someone, they've got their quote unquote bio that they're going to provide. Really boring most of the time. It's like, hey, my name is John Smith. I've accomplished this or that. Cool, man. That's great. But like, who are you as a person underneath all that that has led to those high level achievements? But I don't want to read your Wikipedia page. I want to understand what makes you tick underneath that. And I believe giving people space to express themselves comfortably, where they can say, "Hey, this is who I am," and they're not being judged based on their Wikipedia page, but like what makes them tick, what they enjoy, what their passions are. Meeting people for the person, not just the thing they've accomplished.
Hmm. Yeah, what's helped get deeper, get underneath? What advice do you have there?
Honestly, the biggest thing that's helped me is deprioritizing myself. So I say that cautiously because you have to make yourself a priority, but not when it comes to other people. Right? A lot of people want to talk about themselves, and I don't want to approach a situation where I am word vomiting all over someone else. I
Hmm.
want to be so served in my personal relationships and my personal time where I can, again, create that space to just listen to you, to take a genuine interest in what you have to say, not have to tell you, oh, this thing's going on, that thing's going on, because I'm just bleeding out because I'm not seen or heard in other places in my life. So for me, it's really been about making sure that I am seen and heard in other places that I don't need that to come out in those conversations.
Did you um that the connection between being seen or heard in other contexts, what has brought you to that conclusion that there's a connection psychologically with people that maybe are not present with others or over right there, their self is almost, I'm envisioning like hyperbolized or exacerbated in relationship to another person, like their
Right.
counterpart, as a consequence of not being served in another context. That's a interesting um, uh, uh, proposition. So, what's brought you to that conclusion?
Here's what I would say. You don't have kids yet, but one of the most fascinating things that you will experience is when they say, "Hey, Dad, look at me." They're gonna do a jump. They're gonna jump in the pool. They're gonna do a twist. The very first freaking thing they're gonna do when they're done is look back at you to make sure that you were looking at them. So what I've experienced with that is anytime my kids say, "Hey, look at me. Watch me jump off the diving board. Watch me do this." They're looking to see if you are looking. And for a lot of us as quote unquote adults, we didn't necessarily grow up with that need being fulfilled. So there are a lot of adults you're going to interact with that are still looking for that mom or dad figure in their life to look at them and see them for the thing that they did. Right. So I see that from my kids and I look around at the adults that I have interactions with and realize this is nothing but a 40-year-old kid who's still looking for someone to see them do that fancy twist off the diving board. That's all we are, is we are just grown-up kids still looking to feel loved, appreciated, seen, and heard. So I use that analogy a lot.
Yeah, like was Napoleon, is it
Yeah,
Napoleon, Alexander, Churchill, um, a driving force? You said loved, appreciated, seen,
seen and heard.
heard.
That's what I believe the 4 basic needs all of us have are.
So what's appreciation?
It's different for everybody. Um, I think if you genuinely take an interest in the people around you, you understand what their love language is. And the most important thing I would say with that is the distinction between loving someone and appreciating someone and them feeling loved and appreciated, because those are two very different things.
How? Or
It's very easy for me to say, yeah, I see you, yeah, I hear you. But if you don't feel seen and heard, it doesn't matter, right? It has to do very much with the four parts of communication, right? What's said, what is heard, what is meant, and what's understood. And for a lot of people, when they communicate, they're saying, well, I said this. All right, congratulations. I'm glad that you said that. Is it what you meant? Is it what I heard? And is it what I understood? And I believe that there's a responsibility when you have these conversations to make sure that all four of those things are in alignment, not just say something. That's a lot of times why we get in trouble when we text things, because it's not super clear, what's actually meant, or you don't understand what that person
that it,
understands.
heard it,
Right.
meant,
And
like
understood.
intention,
Yes.
understanding, synthesis.
Yeah. So I believe, when there's some alignment on that, when all four of those things line up, it makes it a lot less stressful.
Um, Said, heard, meant, understood. Because I could say something and mean it in one way, and it's heard in another and understood completely. It's like being in two different rooms within the same room.
Yes.
Hey, what do
And
you
you have
think
to,
about, or go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, think about this. There's going to be some times where maybe you are feeling self-conscious about yourself. You wake up feeling super bloated, you're not feeling super great, and you don't feel comfortable with the clothes you picked out in the closet. You're feeling self-conscious, right? And as you walk through the day, that's on the back of your mind. If somebody says, "Hey, I like your shirt," they could mean, "I genuinely like your shirt." You could receive it as that person's being sarcastic because I look ugly today. I feel fat. I feel a certain way. They could mean it as a genuine compliment. You could receive it and understand it as sarcasm and hate because of where you are at, right? So it's super important to be clear with yourself and understand where you are and what you're thinking, and not criticize and judge someone else and their comments based on what they say, because there could be a real misalignment between what they say and what you hear. So, a lot of us, we don't take it that intentionally when we have conversation. We just verbalize something and keep it moving. And, much the same way, a lot of us receive conversation from other people, and we will internalize it the way that we perceive it, not necessarily the way that they mean it.
What role do you see asking questions has in that?
Huge. I mean, I think asking questions is literally the most important thing you can do. Right? I've never learned anything when I was speaking. Yeah, the quote is roughly that, right? Um, but asking questions is the only way we can actually ever learn something.
Hey, where'd you learn this said, heard, meant, understood thing?
Um, it's a combination of spending a lot of time with Steve and Chris.
Oh, wow. What are one of Steve Weatherford, is Steve Weatherford?
Yeah,
Yeah, what are one of his core values that makes him special? Because I hear about him all the time from like numerous parties.
integrity. I would say doing what you say, saying what you mean. Even when it's uncomfortable, not being afraid to have the conversation. There's one of the things that I've been thinking a lot lately about is people who feel a certain way about somebody else and who are unwilling to have that conversation. Steve is
Hmm.
not that person, right? So I'll give him credit for that. But there are other people who will, all of a sudden you'll see they don't text you back right away, or they're not as communicative as they used to be. They're avoiding a thing, right? They might feel a certain way about you based on an assumption that they are making. And rather than saying, hey, I used to like you a lot, currently not so much, but rather than saying that to your face and saying, hey, here's the thing that personally I'm struggling with because I used to like you. And now, based on this thing that I see that you did, I don't like you as much. It might be awkward, right? But
Mm.
have that conversation because just not responding, just dipping out, just doing that thing, that's not living with integrity, right? And you might think, hey, this other person's acting against my core values. But again, you are going based on what you think, right? You're judging someone based on the decision that they made without understanding the choices they had. And I think that's
Mm.
a really big part.
How do you work yourself up to those conversations that would easily be or how do you work yourself up? Right. I'm listening to this. I'm thinking, oh, that's me right now in this context, in this context.
I don't know that it's
Jim,
a
work us
quick,
through the yeah, do you do push-ups?
I don't know that it's a quick win. I think a big part of it is being unoffendable. I think another big part of it is not looking for an ounce of blood in return. There's a lot of people who are going to approach these conversations and look for getting back at that other person, getting some vengeance because you feel a certain way or you feel slighted by them in some certain way. So you want to come back and attack in a certain way. It can't be that. It has to be a desire to understand the other person. And even if you disagree with them, but a desire to
Mm.
understand, not a desire to prove yourself right and them wrong, a desire to understand why they believe they are right.
I think I like that a lot. The question comes to my mind is, what if I don't have a desire to understand, and what are some of the building blocks to that?
I would start to look at why. And is it because you don't necessarily have a clear understanding of who your authentic self is? You know, to me, I think if we don't know who we are authentically, and if we're not authentically operating as ourselves, we tend to lean on certain beliefs as crutches. And so if I don't truly, how do I want to say it? If I'm not willing to truly understand you, it's because to me, there is some crutch in the way that I'm using as a mask. That if I truly understand you, suddenly that mask is gone, right? Because now I know the information, I have to act on it. So, I think the biggest tipping point that I could ever recommend somebody would be truly understand who they are authentically and to operate as that person as much as humanly possible.
Some tips on, starting a journey of authenticity.
Um, Faith to me would be the number one. Realizing it's much bigger than you. You've got a God-given purpose, and finding out what that purpose is, getting really clear on who you are, what gift you've been given, and why it's been given to you, and then using literally every ounce of your energy to give that gift out. I believe that would be the place that I would start. Getting clear on whose you are and who you are.
Whose you are.
Yeah.
Is that a biblical reference?
Well, really, like understanding that you are serving God, right? So putting your priorities in order and saying, hey, you yourself are not the priority, but you are a son of God, and why are you here? What purpose have you been given? And then carrying that purpose out, right? Putting your purpose in priority order and making sure that you are not the number one.
Hmm. You mentioned Steve and Chris. Is that Chris Vester?
Sure is.
What about one of his values that stands to topic for you?
I would say it's a tough one because he's got a lot of good ones. Integrity is another one, but I don't want to give that answer because I just used it for Steve. But I'll say boldness, character. I think for someone like Chris, one of the things that I respect the most is his ability to be bold quietly. To clarify that, I believe a lot of people, when they envision being bold, it's loud, it's in your face, it's aggressive. But one of the things I appreciate most about Chris and the way that he walks it out is it's not always that. It's, 99% of the time, not that. It's usually reserved, behind the scenes, will work in a way that will respect and honor everybody involved. And I think when we look at what a man is, uh, I believe a lot of us have this vision of masculinity as it has to be very in your face, has to be outward, it has to be testosterone driven, where you're beating your chest and you are going to battle. But it's often not, mostly not. Right? It's the definition of a warrior is someone who brings peace. Right? They're willing to go to war to achieve peace, not for the sake of going to war. And I believe that there are so many men who are operating with that false definition where they are out there looking to say, hey, I'm the biggest warrior, because they're trying to fill some level of void that they have in their life, not to achieve peace, but just to prove to their pride and their ego that they are this thing.
Mm. So is 2025 going to be your best year?
Yeah, absolutely. The word for 2025 is bold.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Mine's intensity.
I love it.
Bold. What's the inspiration behind that?
Fairly similar to what I just spoke on, but for me, I typically am a behind the scenes operator. Where I find myself most effective is in one on one relationships where there's some level of comfort and confidence. So I often find myself not taking the limelight. I'm not a person who enjoys the limelight. I don't seek it out. And oftentimes I will avoid it because it's just not an area where I get a lot of I don't know. I don't necessarily need that to feel fulfilled, right? So I don't seek it out because it just doesn't do anything for me. But I'm oftentimes finding now that my desire to avoid the limelight because I don't find fulfillment from it is actually preventing people from hearing the message. So what I'm looking to push forward in 2025 and what I am pushing forward in 2025 is putting myself out there not for my own credit, not for my own validation, but for the ability to create more one-on-one conversations that I can show up and serve in.
Is that scary?
No, it's very exciting.
What are some of the behavioral changes or like
Finding,
structural, right? Because you have a platform, you have all these listeners, people come on the show. Have you changed things with the podcast, for example, or like is it the business model too, or the business?
yeah. So one of the changes I've made is uh, a lack of caring about the specific formatting of things. So when I started my own personal podcast, I made a nice intro. I found the perfect music. I spent some time editing what it looked like because I wanted it to
Wow.
be a certain way. And I knew going into it was going to evolve over time, that a episode 100 is going to be better than episode number one. Episode 101 will be better than 100. As I've evolved it, I've spent less and less time making it quote unquote perfect and more time making it authentic and putting it out there. So
Nice.
I don't necessarily care if it wins an award or has the best graphics, but is the conversation authentic and will someone get value from it? That's the thing that I've been pushing for more as we move forward. And I believe, a lot of us operate from a desire to be Instagrammable, right? We want to put out this perfect post, this perfect story, this perfect life, but it's really not sustainable. Like there's often times where I'll find myself thinking, hey, I should probably post something about my day because it's the right marketing move, but it's not convenient. I'm not going to literally stop in the middle of what I'm doing to pose for a picture, to put something out there just for the sake of putting it out there. And there's often times when my life is literally just kind of boring. Uh, yeah, it's random. So I spent some time this morning, like I said, baking some cookies and painting some Christmas ornaments. But I had some meetings, and there's just things that are not necessarily exciting, but they're me. So part of that boldness is sharing that really random thing and knowing that, like, hey, it's not going to get a ton of likes and attention, but it's who I am. And if that resonates with somebody and gives them permission to be that for themselves, that's the goal. So it's really removing the desire to be liked and commented and celebrated, but just being authentic, not caring about the numbers.
Yeah, the numbers. Yeah, the numbers. Like,
I mean, the numbers
who's gonna
is
listen to this?
it's a scoreboard for a lot of us, right? We look at, hey, I spent all this time creating this podcast. I got 44 views. But man, if 44 people showed up at your house and you got to have a conversation with them and they left having heard what you had to say, you'd be freaking pumped. But we all want 4 million views. And, to feel like,
Well,
and then
how much destruction is 44 Unabombers?
a lot, it's huge.
I just stopped 44 mass school shootings.
Yeah. But we don't think about it that way.
Why not? I've always thought about it that way. It's an interesting thing though, at the same time, I think I was so wrapped up on the other extreme, my own like almost narcissism that I never thought about any of it. Like it was like, I don't want to be, I'll be authentic, right?
Right.
Or just maybe honest or transparent. I don't think I really even thought much about it. And maybe I'm being overly critical myself, but I don't know if I am. I would love your feedback on this. Like, well, my thought at one point, I wasn't thinking about anything. I was just doing. And maybe I think I've improved. So I'm looking back at the past and saying, I was not, I was finding another way to be. It's like the other extreme of that.
Right.
Like maybe that could be a warning for the audience. But Nietzsche said, "Be careful when casting out your demons. You don't lose the best of yourself." And I feel like I'm learning how to walk again. Like, what's the middle ground
Yeah.
between whatever that was, wherever I've come from the last couple of years, and what's the next few years, or the next phase look like? But I'm happy to hear that you're being bold. That's exciting. Are you
Thank
doing
you.
monologues or like things to share your philosophies on the show or on other people's shows
I
more proactively?
No, is the short answer. Because there's no strategy attached to it.
It's like
So
a intuition.
it's just life. Hey, if there is a thing that I'm feeling and I feel like I want to share it, I'm going to share it. I don't know that I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to do 15 monologues a month.
It's
When I
not like the
feel
part of the
inspired to have a
business plan
conversation, I'm just going to
for
share it.
the got it. So it's not like, all right, the business plan is for
Yeah,
this
literally zero.
funnel and then go down to here and
Yes.
then world domination or whatnot. That's not what's motivating you to do this whole thing.
No,
You're not eating cakes every week so you can live your brand.
no, not at all. It's
Like you got to eat
literally
the whole cake because there can't be a half cake. Like every week we're gonna eat a cake together.
it's literally just about showing up and being present and providing people the conversation so that they can do that in their own life and like just maybe get that aha moment that they're not necessarily being present in every area of their life. And
How are you are you do you feel the fruit of that in your business relationships? And I'm asking that
yes,
because even just we doing the podcast together, you're always paying very close attention. You're not like I can tell when the guest might have although I think I do influence that as a host because I want to really care. But you do pay attention. So my question is like, how's that been from your business? Because I think that could be really good value for the audience that might be not liking their business, not because of any other reason than they forgot about their customers in some degree or something.
Yeah. So it's helped a lot. And, I believe a lot of it has to do with genuinely caring about your customer. So there are times where I will tell my customer, "Hey, I'm refunding your payment because I don't feel like I served enough value during this period." We've got some payments, in like the web design and
Yeah.
marketing agency that people are on like monthly marketing retainers. I'll refund back their money and say, "Hey, this month I don't feel like we provided enough value. It's not fair for me to take this." It's weird. Most people are not used to that. But it's about living authentically and being honest. It's not a business strategy. It's not like, hey, every 3 months I'm going to refund this customer back 10% to keep them on the hook and let them believe I'm a valid person. It's just the right thing to do. And I think that's where we go back to the value of values is it doesn't have to be a business strategy and a marketing plan. It's literally just being yourself. And uh, if you can reduce the gap between how you show up in your house, how you show up in your business, how you show up for yourself, it makes it so much easier. But here's the thing I would say. A lot of people struggle with wearing too many hats. You have to be this version of yourself in the business. You have to be this version of yourself at home. You have to be this version of yourself in the relationship. When you can really align yourself with you first, and then create that alignment between your personal relationship, your spouse, your kids, your business, you don't have to wear that many hats. You just show up as Jim. And when Jim is Jim in the business, in the house, wherever he goes, it's way easier because it's the same. I don't have to be a different version of me when I show up for my kids, for my wife, for you. It's just me. I don't have to try and show up as a different version of
The
me.
problem I have with that personally is because I think not disagreeing with your theory here. I'm thinking I don't live up to it, meaning I'm not that great. Like I need help from people.
So do I.
Like yeah, that's what rises. Like oh, you know, oh, maybe that's why my word's intensity.
Well, I think there's this expectation for people who are high achievers to be the highest achieving thing possible in all categories. That is one of the core problems I see, right? So you want
Hmm.
to be the absolute best at your relationships in your physical form. You want to be the best spiritually. You want to be the best financially. So we go out and we hire coaches and mentors to help us be better. And we have this expectation that we are going to achieve the level of greatness that the mentor has. Okay, but we have to understand that we are not going to do that and we should not want to do that. We have to understand, hey, what is our lane? What is my level of genius? I'm going to be the best at this, and all the other areas I'm going to pursue excellence, but I know I'm never going to achieve it. And it's not a bad thing, but you have to understand you're not going to be better than that than your mentor, right? That's why you have these people in your life. And I believe yes, we should always chase excellence. We should continue to refine and be the best version of us we could possibly be. But there's a really fine line with expecting to be that because it leads to disappointment. It leads to this level of intensity where you feel like there's this pressure on you to have to show up and be that for everybody. But there's a certain point when you say, hey, man, my expertise is this. I can help you, probably more than the average person. But if you want the real expertise, you go talk to John. John's going to help you. It takes a lot of pressure off of you to be all the things for all the people.
That brings us back to the one of the amazing things I've seen in 2024 from tapping into connection, connecting people is I have this, it's like a barrel, not an ocean, because it's it's like a deep barrel, right? It's small enough that I could be in the whole barrel, but it's deep enough that I could drown if I'm not paying attention. of real relationships, like
Right.
real you, many, many others that are really talented and competent, and like connecting them to each other. It's a very rewarding feeling. Like, so my counterpart can get that value. Like that in itself is it's a we shouldn't be all things to all people. That's silly.
Yeah.
That's like a
Often do we
fallacy
find
of
ourselves trying it?
logic or something. Yeah. And I like what you said there. And I think I feel myself becoming more valuable, connecting people of value to what I want to value, which are relationships. And it's been an exciting manifestation of the show,
Right.
and culture, right? Pursuing this culture, this idea of culture. So I agree with that deeply. It's like uh, we can help. It may not be us directly, but it could be us indirectly through the relationships that we have cultivated. Um, I don't know. Curious what your thoughts are on that.
My immediate thought is I don't know how much of a car person you are, but if you look at high-end exotic cars, supercars, hypercars, um, most of them don't have cup holders. Most of them don't brag about their cargo capacity. It's an afterthought. Okay, so the person who is seeking out to build the most extreme version of a hypercar that's going to go 300 miles an hour and break a speed record is not concerned with can they fit sheets of plywood in the trunk. Yet for some reason, we take this totally different mentality for us when we're trying to be the fastest, best performing version of ourselves and also have the most carrying capacity that we could possibly have. Right. So there's nothing wrong with having a Bugatti and a Silverado in your garage. The difference is knowing which one you need to use at any given
Yeah,
moment, not trying to do all the things inside of one. Those are your relationships. Right. So what you're looking to do is to build a garage that has a variety of relationships in it, and those are really experts at a certain thing. So you're not going to go take your Lamborghini to Home Depot to go pick up plywood. You're going to go take your pickup truck. It does not make one more valuable than the other. They each have a certain purpose. And it's to me it's about identifying those and really leveraging those for what they're supposed to be used for. Not trying to be all the things to all the people, not trying to force relationships that are not supposed to be in a certain way to go outside of that. To me, it's really clear when you look at it for cars. If you apply the same logic to people, I think it's a little bit more clear.
I love it, Jim. The word for 24 was space, and the word for 25 is bold. If there's a theme to our show today, what would you say it is?
Authenticity is the first word that comes to mind.
Now, authenticity doesn't just mean I get to be a dick.
No, absolutely not.
Are you sure? Because that's how I interpret it on those TikToks.
Yeah. So
I just
that's,
if you could speak to that for a second in closing, because when we
I'd
hear
love to.
authenticity, I don't know how many people get. I've observed certain you know phenomenon. Like, what does authenticity mean? You know.
It's living each day as free as possible. Now, that doesn't excuse you from the consequences of your actions. Doesn't excuse you from the consequences of the words you say. If you can genuinely wake up every day and truly be grateful for where you are, and you can go to bed at night thankful for the opportunities you had, appreciative of the relationships you had, with no regret, that to me is freedom. Okay, so it's living as yourself and having that much freedom as possible. Now, again, that doesn't excuse you from being a jerk. Doesn't say, hey, this is who I am, take it or leave it, and you can be abrasive with the people around you.
Yeah,
You
I
still have
got
to
a
be a
quote
person of
for you.
character.
That's
Yeah,
my
let's hear it.
question to you. Okay. Authenticity. Sorry. This is fun. Authenticity without responsibility is a precondition for narcissism and alienation.
Yeah.
Right? Because right, I'm gonna be more vocal, I'm gonna be more, right? So because I can be a very intent, well, that's how I'm perceiving it, right? I think that's because of my own insecurities, past interactions, but like let's say intense, separate the wheat from the chaff. Well, that's a painful process. So I've got to have the responsibility to handle what comes back. And if I can't, then I'm just on the pathway to, I might as well just create a course
Right.
and get on the stage and sell it because, yeah. So anyway, I'm curious what your thoughts on that. That came in my head when you were saying that more, that character piece, the authenticity, living each day as free as possible, but having the character to support it, or what you were saying.
Yeah. So, I think if we go back to cars for a second and we'll continue that analogy, do you need to floor it every time you go somewhere?
Ooh, that's a good
Most people say
analogy.
no. Okay. So, yeah, you can be authentic, you can be yourself. Do you need to be as intense in every interaction? Is there a certain amount of responsibility that you can lay out by not pressing the gas as hard as possible? Right? Just because you can go out there and street race everybody and prove to other people how amazing you are at doing that thing, do you need to exercise that at every cost? Right. So if you're in a conversation where you might feel very strong about a certain thing, you don't necessarily need to respond. You don't, if you know, hey, I'm inclined to be abrasive in this, and I know that me having my opinion is going to cause a problem because, hey, this other person's not in a space to receive it. Do I need to speak out and force my opinion on the other person, or can I just have my opinion and be at peace with the fact that I know my opinion? I can care less what they think about me. That's what it comes down to, right? You're not worried about their opinion of you. You've got choices. If you know that you're not worried about their opinion of you, you could word vomit all over them and say, hey, this is my opinion. I don't care what you think. Or you can just shut up because you don't care what they think anyway. So,
And then the other thing
you
is
know,
like, also, I could be worried of not just their opinion of me, but their opinion, because opinions kill people. Like, oh, the bridge works. No, it doesn't. It doesn't work. Don't drive over it. So like the leader in me, it's oftentimes like, or I think that would be the leader in me, the leader in us. Like we care also about the opinion because the opinion can crash airplanes. It's like,
right.
but no, it doesn't work. And it's like, the worst thing for me, I think maybe is to not be either understood yeah, there's definitely there's an acceptance in, but like if I'm, it sucks to be right so much and then not be accepted as being right. I'm sorry, but yeah. That's really, yeah. I would say that would probably be one of the things that really drives me up a wall the most is like, if I am, to get an A on the test, like an A plus, and you get an F. Why? How'd you get an F?
I would ask what difference it makes. If you get the A or
Well,
the F,
I guess it
what
depends. No, that's
changes?
a deep question. I mean, well, um, let's say, well, it was a faulty test, and now we have a bunch of heart doctors that are not unclogging aortas.
Well, I want to say no, not for that, right? So there's obviously the realistic aspect of it,
Like
but I
that's an
mean personally.
important. Well, I think they could be connected. Like, there's we're the sinews of our human condition are intermeshed in what I'm doing or what you're doing and what we're doing, different verticals for and with one another through the the development of our social groups, like what we do and how we do it has a relationship with who we are, and you know, on a very real sense, like we will die, we will run out of resources, we will we will perish. Uh, and now that doesn't, I maybe that's where it's really deep, like a helpful conversation to think through, explore a little. Is that at the same time, well, and I think this is an uh, uh, implicit in your testimony. You know, at what cost do we
Right.
survive? Like to the point where we're all like we become the slaves of our own mastery or something. It's like it's an awareness exercise. How far does the pendulum now? Then I think the pendulum, right, is swinging, and it can get stuck too much to the right or too much to the left. It needs to keep swinging, but we don't want it to. If we're laying in the middle, we don't want it to cut our stomach at the same time. And so it can't be. So anyway, that's where that would be my response. It's like what I do and how I do it has a relationship with how I value myself in a helpful way, you know, socially, societally, you know, and everything following from that, like economically and so on.
Let
Like
me ask
it's
you a different
deeply,
question.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Do you believe that this podcast serves the people who listen to it? Not this specific one, but your
Oh,
podcast.
oh. Well, this especially, I thought, um, I don't know. Like it depends what they're looking for. They could
Okay.
think that it's serving them while it's exactly what they don't need based on what's occurring in their life, even if they think it is. I mean, uh, what do you think?
Yes, I think yes. Right. So it's up to them. And this is we go back to communication. You are having these conversations with people who've done a certain thing, right? If I, as a listener, listen to a conversation between you and Chris, okay, I may interpret that conversation to fit whatever void I have in my life currently. Okay. But if your desire is to have conversations with people of interest and bring out a story that people can learn a lesson from, you are implicitly helping people. Okay, so that one specific person might interpret it a different way based on where they're at personally. But what I'm driving at here is if you genuinely believe
Hmm.
that doing these podcasts, having these conversations is helpful to the community as a whole, okay, it's an act of service to the people who listen. If you genuinely enjoy doing this, to me, that's license to go do it. Okay, that's the freedom that I'm talking about. It it does not matter if whatever the grading matrix is for how to grade a great podcast. Some people are going to say, "Did you win an award? Did you get over 1,000 downloads? How many 5-star reviews did you get? How many people shared it? What makes it a great podcast?" To me, the answer is, did it align with a thing that I enjoyed doing and my values? Did it serve the people? Then the answer is yes. It's really simple. You know, and I think that's where we go back to the value of values.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing. I think that we're just temporally in different places. Like if you like we're completing a puzzle in a sense.
Right.
Rule 7 and beyond order, work as hard as you possibly can on at least one thing and see what happens. If you keep doing what you're doing, someday people are going to recognize that. Even if
Yeah.
you're
And if they
dead, you
do,
know, it's like
yeah.
transcends time and space. Like it, right? There's quality there. It's a quantity. Naturally, from that quantity will follow,
Right.
and quality will come as a consequence of quantity. Now, of course, well, I guess if somebody's, they'd have to be pretty damn bad. No, but that's a deep, right? That we're like that. What is bad?
Yeah,
It's
but
all relative. It's all comparison. It's all relative. It's all comparison. We're constantly
right.
comparing and grading and judging. But you're
It
saying you're
depends
like
on where you're at.
Kierkegaard. It's like Kierkegaard. Uh, uh, you know, dang, it's totally lost me. But find that one thing and go all through in it.
Right.
Find Kierkegaard, the Socrates of Christendom, in the Danish philosopher. Like, find that thing and go all in it. You're
Right.
saying, and
And
none of
that's
the
where
other
we go back
stuff
to
matters.
authenticity. Yes. So if you are authentically operating as yourself, you find enjoyment and fulfillment from this. The more that you enjoy it and the more that you continue to do the things that you enjoy, the results will come. The right people will find it. The quality will increase over time because you genuinely enjoy doing it.
And then
Right.
the damn system will turn it into some type of obligation, responsibility.
If you let it.
Well,
Yeah.
that is part of our I get what do you yeah, if you let it in some sense, like that's going to come. Some it might have to die again. The snake
Yeah.
that doesn't cast its skin ceases to be a snake. The mind that doesn't cease to change its mind ceases to be mind or something. Um, well, fun. I'm definitely enjoying this conversation. Oh, there was one other thing I wanted to ask you. Oh no, I wanted to share that there in the last lecture of the. Are you on the Peterson Academy?
No,
It's really wonderful. I'm in
I'll check
this
it out.
course on personality, lecture one, and at the end he talked about I don't know how to say his name, Markea Eliad, a religious historian who would study these shamanistic traditions and talked about at the end they were talking about all of his studies around those traditions and around these varying myths throughout humanity that led Peterson to talk about the our calling will call out to us, and like when we're what you're saying, like what we're when we're doing something that just seems so easy, or we're in a classroom that's like it's so easy for our attention to follow that information or lesson that aligns with our call. Like
Right.
that's something we should probably pay attention to. And the things that don't speak out to us, don't call to us, that we just got to have muscle through, that's something separate. And life is part of it in this is finding or letting I think this authenticity, like being open to what our destiny pushes us towards.
Yeah.
Lecture one in the new personality course. It was at the end.
There's a great quote my brother uses often. He's got it actually tattooed on his arm that says,
Wow.
"Fate is not chains but wings." And what you said really reminded me of that right there. Is that a lot of times I think our destiny, our fate, is the thing that we feel tied to, and we're sort of stuck with. But if we use it authentically, it can actually be a platform for us to really take off.
Fate is not chains but wings. It's awesome.
Yes,
What's your brother's name?
Chris.
Chris Nietzsche. Jim Sabellico, you're the man. This was so much fun. I shout out to, I think it was, I said this episode 482, season 41. If you're listening to this show, go listen to our first episode together. Where can people follow you? One place.
Uh, Jim Sabellico. You can find me on pretty much any social platform as that. I am literally the only one in the world. So you go
There
look for
you
Jim Sabellico,
go.
you'll find me.
We got rid of all the other ones.
Yep, one of
Go
one.
listen
Authentic as it
to
gets.
No Half Cakes. And please leave us a review on the Culture Matters podcast. We will see you next time. Thanks, my friend.